Welcome to The Explainer. It seems like so many of our big decisions just backfire, right? Well, today we're going to dig into why that happens. And we're going to explore this really powerful idea called territorial foresight. It's a way to help us break free from what the source material calls the tyranny of the short term.
Okay, let's kick things off with the question that's really at the heart of it all. When our leaders make a big call today, on things like infrastructure or housing or the economy, are they actually creating something that will last, a real asset for the future? Or are they just kicking the can down the road, leaving a mess for the next generation to clean up?
And this, right here, this is the absolute core of the problem. Our political cycles, our planning cycles, they run on these incredibly short timelines. I mean, think about it. An election cycle is maybe 4 years long, but the things we build in that time, a new bridge, a housing development, those things stick around for 70, 100, even more years. It's a total mismatch. And this huge disconnect is what the source calls the tragedy of time horizons.
So that mismatch, it creates this trap, this thing we're going to call the tyranny of now. It's this situation where the pressure to do something right now to solve today's crisis just completely steamrolls any thought about the long-term consequences.
And the thing is, this isn't an accident. The issue is literally baked right into our systems. Our political and economic structures are all set up to reward quick fixes and immediate results. It means that even leaders with the best intentions are pushed, they're incentivized, to focus on today's fire, even if putting it out means they're actually creating a much, much bigger fire for tomorrow.
For a long time, we kind of got away with this. This short-term way of planning sort of worked, mainly because the world felt a lot more predictable. We could just assume that the future would be, well, pretty much like today, just with a few tweaks. But that assumption is not just outdated anymore, it's actually become dangerous. I mean, just look at the last 15 years or so. We've had a massive financial crisis, huge shifts in migration, a global pandemic, crazy energy shocks. Disruption isn't the exception anymore. It's the new normal. It's the constant background noise of policymaking. And that slow, predictable world that all of our planning models were built for, yeah, that world's long gone.
And this right here is a perfect example of the risk. So imagine a region has a housing shortage. The immediate pressure is to just build, right? But what if they completely ignore the long-term demographic trends? What if their population is actually aging and set to shrink? Well then, today's solution becomes tomorrow's massive hangover. A bunch of empty houses and totally stranded infrastructure.
Okay, so if the problem is this obvious, you have to ask, right? Why don't we just adapt? Well, it turns out the challenge isn't just about our broken systems. It actually goes deeper. It's about how our own brains are wired.
It turns out we all suffer from something called cognitive inertia. It's this deep, natural tendency we have to just cling to what's familiar. We resist thinking about future scenarios that challenge our assumptions, especially if they feel uncomfortable or inconvenient. It's like we'd rather stick with the map we know, even when we can see it's leading us straight towards the edge of a cliff.
So, how in the world do you fight something that's so deeply ingrained in us? Well, this is where Foresight gets really clever. It uses this fascinating, almost counterintuitive technique. It actually forces us to engage with possibilities that, at first glance, might seem completely and utterly ridiculous.
And here's the crazy part, the real paradox. Those seemingly outlandish scenarios, they're often the most valuable ones. And you might ask, why? It's because the fact that we find them so uncomfortable, that very feeling shines a giant spotlight on our hidden assumptions. It reveals the critical blind spots in how we're thinking right now.
All right, so how do we actually move forward? Let's dive into the solution that the source material presents. It's a practical method called territorial foresight.
So what is it really? At its core, territorial foresight is all about adding a crucial spatial layer to how we think about the future. It recognizes that these huge transitions, things like climate change or automation, they don't just happen everywhere in the same way. No way. They hit different cities, different regions, different communities in vastly different ways. It's all about understanding the geography of the future.
Okay, so what does this actually look like when you put it into practice?
Well, the whole process really boils down to 3 key tools in the Foresight toolkit. So let's break this down real quick. First, you've got scenarios. Now, these are not predictions, okay? They're more like stories about a few different plausible futures. The goal is to stress test your plans. You ask questions like, what happens to our city if remote work becomes permanent versus a future where everyone goes back to the office? Then you have visions. This is all about getting everyone to agree on a desirable future, a kind of North Star that everyone can work towards.
And finally, you've got impact assessments. This is where you get really specific. You investigate how a big trend like rising sea levels is going to play out for different neighborhoods and different groups of people. Now, remember that cognitive inertia we talked about? That resistance to new ideas? Well, to get past that, the source shares this key insight. You have to make the process playful. I know, it sounds a little strange, right? But by using things like structured role-playing games, you allow people to step into an alternate future and explore those really uncomfortable ideas without any of the usual political risk. And what happens is, it just unlocks this level of creativity that a boring old workshop could never, ever achieve. And here's where it gets really transformative. When you actually start using these tools, something amazing happens. It's not just that you change the content of your plans. No, it goes way beyond that. It fundamentally changes the entire culture of how your community makes decisions.
So what does that cultural shift actually look like? Well, for one, it connects these big, abstract ideas like AI to what they'll actually mean for people in your town. Two, it just completely shatters that lazy old assumption that the future is just going to be a repeat of today. Three, it helps you create flexible, living strategies, plans that can actually adapt instead of those rigid master plans that just end up gathering dust on a shelf. And finally, and this is huge, it's social. It totally reshapes how people talk, collaborate, and even dream about their future together.
And really, that's the whole point. This is all about empowerment. It's about reclaiming agency. It's the difference between being purely reactive, just getting tossed around by the waves of change, and becoming proactive. It's about grabbing the helm and actually steering your community towards the future you all decide you want.
So in the end, that's the choice that this idea presents to every single one of us, leaders, planners, citizens. Are we just going to keep drifting into the future, reacting to one crisis after another? Or are we going to use tools like these to deliberately, thoughtfully, and collectively choose our path forward? The decision really is ours to make.